3 months ago, Britain's most colourful political career came to an end. 13 years after suing one newspaper for libel, another revealed that he'd asked a friend to provide a false alibi that could have been used during the court case. He's been branded a liar and expelled from his party for 5 years. But he's remained in hiding and in silence. Tonight, though, he breaks cover. And in his most revealing interview ever, the millionaire novelist talks about the controversies and scandals that have dogged his life. Our reporter is Martin Bashir.
Chapter 1. Coincidences, writers are told, usually by the critics, must be avoided, although in truth the real world is full of incidents that in themselves are unbelievable. Everyone has had an experience that if they wrote about it would appear to others as pure fiction.
What goes up must come down.
Jeffrey Archer, a man whose life seems to parallel the flawed heroes of his own novels. At one moment striding to victory, the next crashing to the ground in need of resuscitation.
I think in some ways it can be weeks later that you start feeling what a bloody fool I've been. I could have had that job and would have enjoyed immensely doing it, and will regret for the rest of my life my own stupidity.
The battle is over, but the war of
Forced out himself, he's now an armchair fan of the mayoral contest, watching Labour's botched selection at his Cambridgeshire vicarage last week. His most feared opponent is out.
I would love to have beaten the bastard, but I would still fight to have his name on the paper. And I used to say to my team, we're going to need a miracle to beat this man. And they used to say the miracle is that the Labour Party won't let him stand.
Chapter 2. When I was at school, they used to laugh at me because I was small, said Andrew. They called me puny. What did you do about it? Asked Clarissa. I trained hard and ended up as captain of the school rugby team, and that made them stop laughing.
Politics has been in the Archer family's blood since the beginning of the last century. Geoffrey, or Tuppence as his mother referred to him in her local newspaper column, was born in London in 1940. At school he was known as puny because of his small stature. His response was to take up bodybuilding and athletics. He got 3 O-levels and tried several careers, including the police force, before settling for a job as an unqualified PE teacher at Dover College. But when the school recommended him to Oxford for teacher training, he suddenly claimed to have studied at an American college. It was the first of Jeffrey Archer's tall stories. Were you ever a fellow of the International Federation of Physical Culture?
Well, I think there is such a qualification, but I don't think it's worth having. It's the sort of thing you sign on for. I don't think it is of any significance. I couldn't pretend it was a real academic qualification. The only academic qualification I have, other than the O-levels, is that I got the Diploma of Education at Oxford.
Builds bulk, brawn and stamina for all bodybuilders.
In fact, the International Federation of Physical Culture is not an academic institution at all. As you now know, the International Federation of Physical Culture is a bodybuilding club which sends magazines of exercises for home bodybuilding.
I did discover.
Home. And it's based in Chancery Lane. Why would that letter describe you as a fellow of the International Federation of Physical Culture?
I don't have the letter in front of me, I don't.
Taller, bigger and stronger.
Did you feel the need during that period to, given your lack of qualifications, to slightly embellish your...
Well,
people do that, don't they?
I'm afraid they do. And,
Did you do it?
I'm afraid I could be accused of slight exaggeration, yes. But not in the passing of the Diploma of Education.
No, prior to that.
Running for one's country.
No,
so
quite.
those things that happen.
Good morning. This is Jeffrey Archer speaking. Your Conservative candidate.
But it was politics that really got the young Archer racing. In 1969, he fought his first parliamentary election as Conservative candidate for the constituency of Louth in Lincolnshire.
How do you do? Jeffrey Archer, your Conservative candidate. Good morning. My name's Jeffrey Archer, the Conservative candidate. Good morning, ladies.
After winning the seat, aged 29 years and 233 days, he announced he was the youngest MP to sit in the Commons. What were you getting by virtue of claiming to be the youngest? Clearly there was some status in it, wasn't there?
Possibly.
But you were trumpeting that rather frequently, so you clearly thought that it had some value attaching yourself.
I thought it was fun, yeah.
You thought it was fun to claim that you were the
Not
youngest?
claim, fun to be the youngest member, yeah.
But you weren't?
No, I wasn't.
So why did you make the claim without checking the facts?
That's laziness, I think.
Wasn't being deliberately
Oh, no,
deceptive?
I often feel some of the accusations made like that hardly add up to great significant life changes.
No, they don't. But when you add them all together, there is the claim that you were for 2 years at the University of California, that you were better qualified than you were, that you were the youngest ever MP. There's a suggestion that you were trying to embroider reality in some way. Do you accept that?
Yes.
One of your friends and the former MP Giles Brandreth has said that, and I quote, Jeffrey Archer is a romantic and that he's ready to accept that he's been on occasions a fantasist.
I'm certainly a romantic.
That's fairly accurate, isn't it, though? On occasions you've fantasised, haven't you?
Don't we all?
Even your wife said, famously in the libel
Famously.
trial, that you had, I quote again, a gift for inaccurate précis. What do you think she
Well,
meant?
I would never argue with her.
No, indeed. But what
If
did
she said it, it's right.
But what did she mean by that?
Well, I think that she meant that I like things to be larger than life, and I like to, and therefore perhaps exaggerate in that way, and she's right.
Is she right? Can you see why a tendency to, as you put it, make things larger than life can be dangerous when you hold public office?
Yes. Yes, I do think that's a fair comment. But I am bound to say to you that if we are only going to have people in public life who have never made mistakes, or never dreamed, or pressed a little harder than they should have done,
Or fantasised?
or your word, you're never going to have anybody.
In 1966, Archer married a fellow student at Oxford, a brilliant scientist called Mary Whedon. Over the next 30 years, her affection for him would be sorely tested by a series of humiliating scandals.
Chapter 3. 4 men, unknown to each other, checked the market price of Prospector oil in the final edition of the London Evening Standard. It was £3.70. All 4 of them were rich men, looking forward to consolidating their already successful career.
The Archers were living comfortably on Geoffrey's parliamentary and business ventures and Mary's academic salary. But in 1973, he was persuaded to invest his entire fortune in a company called Aquablast. He thought he'd make a killing, but the person he trusted ran off with his money. Archer was forced to resign his seat as an MP, fearing imminent bankruptcy. He'd lost his home, he'd lost his job. What was Mary's reaction?
She was tremendous.
Again?
Again. She was amazing. I left Parliament.
Because in fact you hadn't told her that you were making this investment, had you?
No.
Why not? You were pledging all of your assets
Well,
on
I
a
suppose-
major risk investment, and you didn't tell your wife, who at that point in time was pregnant with your second child.
Well, as I repeat, I didn't think there was any fear of losing money. It didn't strike me that they were stealing it. That hadn't crossed my mind.
As so often would happen, you seem to have plucked defeat from the jaws of victory by your own
Stupidity.
So, unemployed and financially broken, Archer decided to write a novel. Not a penny more, not a penny less. A book that would sell millions, be adapted into a television series, and launch his career. He's now the third biggest selling novelist in the world. But even his writing career has sparked controversy. In 1984, Archer was invited to judge a local short story competition. The winning entry was written by Kathleen Burnett. Her story in particular caught his eye. There was one incident where you were accused of stealing an idea from a competitor who won a short story competition that you were involved in judging. And in her story, the narrator turns out, in the end, to be a cat.
Correct.
In your story, the narrator turns out to be a cat. How do you account for that?
That is correct. She came second in a local competition at Cambridge. Absolutely correct. And I loved the idea. I thought the idea was very clever and told her straight away.
The conceit.
Great idea. I got the idea from the lady, but you will not find in her story and my story 2 words that followed. In fact, I made a point of waiting 2 or 3 years before I actually wrote it, so that I couldn't actually remember anything except what I thought was a very clever idea. But the narrator is actually not talking about his girlfriend. He's talking about a cat, which you don't discover until the last split second.
Rita Chiquita arched her back, did a few dance steps on the spot, and purred. I began to lap up the milk happily, my tail swishing from side to side.
Before you wrote that book, did you seek permission from that author?
I said to her I thought the idea was lovely and that I would try and write a short story.
So you told her
I
that?
told her, yeah.
And did you pay her?
No, I did not.
So you didn't pay her for the idea, though you took it. Were you absolutely explicit that you were going to write this story in deploying the same conceit as she had?
Well, I don't think it's as simple as that.
No.
I asked you to read the whole story, her story, and the whole of my story, and as I say, there are no 2 words following.
Chapter 4. Just look up the new stock in the FT around the middle of next year and buy yourself a few, because they'll be what my father would have called a risk worth taking. By the way, Matthew advises me that I've just given you what's termed as inside information.
Meanwhile, Mary Archer's professional career was also proving successful.
Hello. The Anglia region is in the forefront of the scientific revolution.
As well as occasional presenting on Anglia television, she became one of the company's non-executive directors. But in 1994, her husband plunged them both into a major financial scandal by buying shares in Anglia for his friend Brusque Saib, days before a takeover bid sent the share on behalf of a Kurdish friend.
He bought the shares.
You bought them on his behalf?
Yes.
And your wife Mary was an Anglia director. Why did you do that? Why didn't he buy them himself?
Well, he was with me at the time. It was just, why didn't he buy the Yorkshire shares?
But he had his own stockbroker.
Yes. Well, we were here discussing it.
But why did you need to buy the shares for him?
It was a mistake. I should have said, I recommend you to buy any small television company shares. I wasn't too keen on Scotland or Tyne Tees because they were so small that although I was convinced they'd be taken over, as every paper was saying they would, I didn't think there was much in that, whereas I thought with Yorkshire and Anglia they were both likely to make him a profit. You're quite right. Quite right. I should have said to him, go home and invest in your own stockbroker. I recommend it. They'll both do well.
You can see why people have put 2 and 2 together, because your wife's a director and you're buying shares on behalf of a friend.
But if I may say so, there was a 6-month inquiry by the DTI and they said there was nothing to answer. There was a second inquiry, which I say I wasn't that closely involved, which again there wasn't, and then the Labour Party also thought they'd look into it, or the government of the day, and they were told also.
Why did you even risk the suspicion of insider trading.
Bad judgment.
Again. Why did you risk it?
I don't think I was thinking in that way that morning. I don't think I sat there saying, you know, this is going to harm me greatly. I mean, the sum of money was not very large.
You see, one of the problems with this is that in September 1992, you yourself had actually written to Anglia Television as the husband of the director, making it clear that it would be improper to deal in the company's shares yourself.
Correct.
But you then subsequently reneged on that promise.
A couple of years later, or whatever period of time it was, I'd totally forgotten.
Now, why?
It was bad judgment.
So
I shouldn't have done it.
You'd forgotten the letter that you'd written?
Well, what was it, 2 years before? I don't
Yes.
remember. 2 years before. I didn't flash straight into my mind that I'd written a letter 2 years earlier, no.
The best case scenario, though, puts your wife Mary in an impossible position, doesn't it? In that whole situation.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I mean, the best case scenario, which was so clear to everyone, and everyone wrote it and everyone said it, is there is no more honest person in Britain than Mary Archer. There is no way she could have been involved in any way. Every human being wrote it, said it, and it was so true. Mary could never have been involved.
And I'm not disputing that at all.
Indeed.
What I'm saying is, you put her in an invidious position, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
What did you say to her?
Well, we're now going over the fact of how many times in my life I apologized to my wife.
But it's quite often now, isn't it?
Yes.
Chapter 5. Raymond travelled back up to Marble Arch, but instead of turning towards home, he drove down Park Lane again. The girl looked up and down the street before strolling over to the car, opening the passenger door and taking a seat. "Looking for business?" "Oh, what do you mean?" asked Raymond hoarsely. "It's £10 at my place." "Where's your place?" he heard himself say. "I use a hotel in Paddington."
In 1985, the News of the World filmed Archer's friend Michael Stackpool handing prostitute Monica Coughlin a brown envelope containing £2,000. Archer, then deputy chairman of the Tory party, said he was trying to help her, but it was a sensational story which badly hurt his wife.
Never met the lady, spoken to her, because she kept ringing him up.
So where did the contact between them start?
She rings him up.
And why did she ring him up in the first place? Why was the first phone call?
I suspect she thought there was money at the end of it. I don't know.
Archer resigned again, but this time he thought he'd had the last laugh. When the Daily Star claimed that he'd paid Coughlin for sex, Archer sued and won a record £500,000 payout. But last November, 14 years on, the affair came back to haunt him. His friend Ted Francis said he'd helped Archer by giving him a false alibi that could have been used in the libel trial. There were tapes supporting his claim.
I mean, what were you doing on September the 9th last year? I didn't find that. And you said, well, we had dinner here, didn't we? And I said, well, a few days. Do you remember?
Yeah, well, we've got to be careful, Ted.
Yeah.
We don't want to go to court of law with this.
The fallout was spectacular. Archer, the Conservative candidate for London Mayor, was out. What were your initial thoughts when you heard that the News of the World were going to run a story about your relationship with Ted Francis? What was your immediate reaction?
To try and remember what it was about, and then the horror of having to resign. I thought the honourable thing to do was go quickly. Didn't want to, because I wanted to be the mayor. I wanted to do the job. I'd worked for 2.5 years preparing for that job. And so I suppose just total despair, total feeling of real failure, having let people down. Just desperation to begin with. I mean, that's some months ago now. No one has been through all of that. And it hasn't been fun.
What was your reaction when you learned that there were taped recordings of your conversations?
Surprise.
Just surprise?
Well, I suppose it's naivety really, not to realise that's the way newspapers behave. But I go on being a naive enthusiast. And it brings the periodical downfalls.
What are your feelings towards him now? He was a friend of yours.
Yes, he was. Almost don't feel anything at all. Almost couldn't explain to myself or understand why any human being would do that, but that hasn't been what I thought about, because it's my fault. I was the one who made the mistake. I was the one who caused it to happen, and I have been punished. So I don't have a tendency to sit there and blame other people. I blame myself.
What did you say to your wife?
Poor Mary's been through this 2 or 3 times already, and if I owe an apology to anyone first, it's Mary, who always takes it in such a stoic and stalwart way. I told her. She was the first person I told the details to.
What did you say to her?
Well, I told her what was going to happen in the next 24 hours.
That a story was going to appear in the newspaper?
In the News of the World. And that I had made the decision that I would have to resign. And I was very sorry, because I let down a series of people who had been on my team and worked very hard for 2.5 years. And in particular, I let her down. And I was very apologetic. And at the time, very broken.
Were you in tears?
Close to, yes.
What did she say to you?
Mary's a very remarkable woman. I've never met a more remarkable woman. She was cross with me, and rightly so.
She was cross with you?
Oh, yes. I think because she did feel I could do the job, and did feel I'd thrown away this opportunity.
He'd also badly damaged the Conservative Party. They responded by suspending him for 5 years.
When you became the Conservative candidate for London Mayor, you assured the party chairman, Michael Ancram, that there were no more skeletons in the cupboard. Why did you say that?
Well, because I thought it was the truth.
You thought it was the truth?
I couldn't think of anything that would arise.
So you had no idea, your memory didn't jar, that actually something like this might come out?
No, I don't remember everything that happened 14 years ago, no.
But before you offered your candidacy, you knew all about these things, didn't you? You knew
I
about
again must repeat that my lawyers have told me not to answer anything that...
But how could you say, with a straight face, that there were no more skeletons in the cupboard, when you knew about your relationship with all of the individuals who were involved, ultimately in what brought you down?
As you know, Martin, my lawyers have said I can't discuss this.